Friday afternoon, folks. Ted Ralston here, hosting our show Where the Road Leads. And this show, at very suggestion, will probably be changed into Follow the UAV down that road or something like that in the future. Anyway, we're sorry for the little bit of a late start here, some technical difficulties. That really means that the host isn't capable of handling the technology we have here in the studio. But normally you'd see in this studio people left and right. The people left and right are actually in Sacremento, California, and that would be Bruce Parks. Bruce is joining us by Skype. He's been on the show here in person in the past, but is presently in Sacramento. So Bruce, welcome aboard to the show today.
Good afternoon, Ted, and how's everything in Honolulu?
Things are great here, actually. We don't know. We just got here 2 hours ago. We were with you yesterday and last night in the conference in San Jose, and just got to the airport returning a couple hours ago, and we've managed to get down here to the show, and we never let the show down. Always be here for the show. Arrange our travel around it, and I appreciate you doing the same thing for us on your end. By the way, this is our Thanksgiving table. This is the last show we have before Thanksgiving, and typically at Thanksgiving you want to have a bird on your table in some place of respect, and we have one here. This happens to be an unmanned aircraft, also referred to as a UAS, or in slang, or as a bird. So we have our our Thanksgiving bird here on the table for all to enjoy. So we don't allow ad-libs on this show, so I've really got to not talk as much as I normally would. But I just wanted to say, Bruce and I were both at a conference this week in San Jose, they call it the DroneWorld conference. And I'm still reacting, as I'm sure Bruce is, to all the information we heard, the contacts we made, and the insight and information that came tumbling forth. And a lot of it can be focused here in Hawaii, on Oahu, in the ocean, and in the natural environment. But my idea, my views anyway, on this particular conference was sort of a transitional conference between the traditional ones in UAS that have a lot of technology subjects being discussed. I think we're seeing for the first time a really strong business orientation, legal orientation, the framework of response that the whole society has to have in order to wrap itself around UASs or UAVs and take advantage of them. That's what I saw. Bruce, what did you see in this conference this week?
Well, I saw, a real sense that things were beginning to move. I referred to it as slack tide, that we're sitting there right in the middle where things are not moving, but they're going to move fairly quickly. And I think that was the sort of the overriding consensus with many of the people who were there, that things are starting to move. We're getting more COAs out, more 333s. People are beginning to fly in specific areas and with specific industries. So I do believe that the whole thing is going to open up, but we are all hoping that it opens up sooner rather than later.
And to that extent, you mentioned the 333s, which we've talked about on this show before, the exemptions. That's a category that allows commercial operators to use UASs even in advance of the formal rule change that enables that. And I think we heard numbers like 2,800 have been issued so far. Some big number like that, which is incredible.
Yeah, that's the number I heard. I think 2,800 is right.
That's a lot of people out there, and it's starting to become a situation where the users are starting to become aware of that. That is, the people who need the UAS or drone services, and are beginning to realize that this is available, and looking in the yellow pages or online to try to figure out who's got capability, who can support them. And that includes the disaster issues as well, such as search and rescue or weather storms and such like this. People are starting to see that there's a function that can be performed and is available today. How do you think, Bruce, as this grows, the exemption was created just as a gap filler, but still there's not like a register that people can turn to find where drone capabilities, drone services, or drone operators are that they can call upon to get some work done or take care of an emergency situation. How do you think we're going to work that problem in terms of?
Well, I really think, Ted, that there are quite a few services out there now gearing up to do precisely that. I can't recall any of their particular domain names at the point, but there are many that are gearing up to create just that kind of an environment where it's almost like an Angie's List of drone pilots in some ways, but because people are going to have a need for a variety of services from the drone industry. Drones will be able to solve a great many more problems than we can even conceive of at the moment. And you're going to see more of that. So I think that problem will resolve itself very, very quickly.
Do you think there'll be a role for AUVSI, which I recognize you represent to a certain extent, in maybe making available a national list of available certified drone operators that the public can turn to?
I don't see AUVSI doing that, only because I think there's so many private companies beginning to do exactly that. So, I mean, you can just Google drone services, and I haven't done that recently, but you'll come up with quite a few companies that are trying to match pilots to particular missions.
So then the issue will, in the public use and access to the drones, part of it's going to be the creativity of the public trying to figure out what terms to Google on in order to find that operator in his area. So it just struck me that with the 2,800 operators out there, that's just so many that we kind of do need a yellow pages or some way to categorize these operators. Some of them may be doing wedding photography, some may be doing environmental research and such like that. There could be different categories. So I don't think we have an answer here, but I just was struck by the size of the number. And I know the number is a lot bigger than the FAA ever imagined we would see in this domain. But I think what goes through my mind is that one of the multiple issues we have to think about for the future is how to increase the connectivity between the potential using public, the commercial services that are sitting out there right now, and continue to make available that capability, not just the drone operations, but also the analysis of the information coming out of them. So as you point out, the thing is about ready to break open, and it's exciting to see that all happening.
Yeah, I'm certain that it is, ready to break open, and it's like I said, let's just hope that it's sooner than later, because there are a lot of companies that have got millions of dollars invested in this industry, and there really isn't at the moment, at least within the United States, a real return on investment available to a lot of these companies. So they're just bleeding cash as they're waiting to get the doors open, and that goes all the way, Ted, from manufacturers of individual aircraft to manufacturers of sensors to drone pilots to you name it. And the additional thing, Ted, that I think perhaps more importantly is that it really does keep the lid on development, because you can't field test a lot of what you think will work, and that's a real deterrent to the industry at this point.
That's interesting, and of course that leads into the UAV test sites that the FAA established and how functional they are in terms of being able to accelerate the testing and the analysis and the discovery of data and such that would then allow the industry to move forward. So we have that as a yet to be developed idea as well. And I just wanted to throw one thing on the table here. One of the tasks that we've got in support of the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center is to try to work with the disaster operations people. I just have with me here about a half-inch thick wad of paper, which is the response we got from a couple of recent conferences, such as this one and the one in Iowa about a month ago, where we've asked the people involved in disaster management, disaster operations, to put themselves in the incident commander's shoes or put themselves on the deployed team and answer the question, how would you find UASs or UAVs most useful in the execution of your tasks? And secondly, what kind of barriers do you foresee? And what I was going through my mind as I was editing and taking notes of all this is that we have sitting here a sort of a user-based set of requirements that may be very soft at this point in time, but it's the beginning of the user standing up and saying, here's what I need. And we've got to find a way to continue getting that level of interest coming in from the user community. Then we've got to find a way to distill it and then push that forward to the manufacturers. So as yet another one of these loosely connected aspects that characterizes a newly emerging business area. And it would be interesting to think back, Bruce, to other areas where we've had this kind of technology injection into the society and how they have dealt with, how that situation got dealt with in terms of defining requirements and getting them reacted to by the manufacturers or by the supply side industry. We were talking earlier about, for example, the jet skis, which are introduced 30 or 35 years ago as an ocean toy. They have become a critical aspect in ocean search and rescue these days. So they've gone from a toy to a very functional system. And we're kind of at the same place here.
Well, yeah, and like any industry, it evolves, it iterates, and with this industry in particular, as we increase our capabilities to analyze data and to make data available to increasing numbers of people, that of course creates more rapid iteration. And the way I look at it is that the rate of change in the industry, that rate itself is changing, and it's being fed not just by the development of an airborne autonomous drone, but it's being fed by computational capabilities. Look at the impact, for instance, Ted, that GoPro has had on the drone industry. I mean, it's staggering, really. So you're getting one piece of technology radically affecting another piece of technology, and they iterate and they change and they improvise and they create, and that's really being, as great as it has been so far, it's really being inhibited by the failure of the FAA to really be able to move the ball.
That's an interesting point. And of course, the regulations and this sort of thing weren't a factor in, say, the GoPro revolution. Weren't a factor necessarily in the jet ski activity we spoke of earlier. So then the hope is that next year, with the execution of the Federal Aviation Regulation 107, which is that body of rules that will control at least the 55-pound and smaller UAVs, we'll start to see some elimination of that as a problem and a barrier, and now even a greater acceleration. So we see the regulatory system coming together. We see the users starting to define needs. Manufacturers are starting to deal with liability issues, insurance issues, and sort of the continuity of business pieces that that are needed in order to make a sustainable business. So this thing is in many different fronts is all moving along in the right direction. How do you think we could generate exercises or experiments or something of that type that draw together these various pieces? We have the conferences and such, but exercises where you actually get real people, like we were doing yesterday in the Fairfield, California Police Department. Those kind of things are what's going to be the place where the actual connection occurs between the users and the systems, and where the requirements get sorted out and the real requirements remain, and those that are not necessarily important disappear. It would be interesting to think how that will move forward. AVUSI, for example, that you represent, has a great series of challenges that are issued every year. The one in Maryland is a really great challenge, with a lot of autonomous solutions coming out as the solutions. But and working with the schools, your thoughts on how we might take this sort of emerging situation and express it into the K through 12 educational domain? How do you see that or do you see that as a way we could then get a broader distribution of the capability and a sort of a sense that the users have to start thinking of what they want to do in order to capitalize on this? Use the educational system to get into that.
Oh, there's no doubt about that, and I think that as you're well aware, next October we're going to be holding the first ever International Drone Racing Championships on the island of Oahu, up there at Kualoa Ranch. And one of the facets of that is we are going to bring young people from around the islands. We're going to actually set up a camp so that they can design, build, and actually fly their rigs in competition at Kualoa Ranch next October. But what that does is it exposes young people to the possibilities of drone racing, but more importantly, it exposes them to science and to math and education, art, technology, and allows them to really bring those tools together to create change. And it doesn't just stay there, working on drones. It floats over onto every other form of robotics, of math, of science, of research. And I think that that's the way you're going to do that. But as you said, there are other arenas where people will really get to see and experience that the kind of technology and its applications, and the more people see it, the better they understand it, the less fearful they are of it, and that's an important criteria.
You know, the mention you made of the October 2016 international drone races in Kualoa is something that is incredible, that you've created, and Scott Resland and others. But this then provides sort of a model, just so the people watching this can understand. What we were talking about is the first real level of purpose-designed UASs, things that are designed for racing. They're designed for very high performance margins, very rapid response in terms of the onboard cameras and such, extremely quick decision-making by the part of the operator in order to run a slalom course, that sort of thing. So we're looking at the extreme levels of performance in machinery and in decision-making, cognition, communication, all coming together in a fairly small package that is accessible to many people. The cost isn't high. The entry cost is not a barrier to entry. And putting this into a summer camp type orientation as you're speaking then makes it available to lots of kids. But so the concept of racing is the motif that brings together all these areas of interest and of capability in a way that is sort of neutral. That is, it's not like, it's not a particular issue like life-saving or environmental. It's all things together, and we could take from that emerging pot of technology and extract functionality that will help in life-saving, help in environmental work, help in weather prediction and such like that through the high levels of performance that we get out of the UAVs. So that's a really complicated situation to understand, and took me a long time to get my arms around it, and I'm sure people, first time hearing this, are going to be equally in need of a lot of information in order to properly put it in scope and characterize it. But the racing motive, once again, my hands off to you, sir, for great credit for having done that. Everything we've got in this life is developed in racing: automobiles, airplanes, even cell phones. These cell phones, a contest. How fast can kids do cell phones on national TV and such? So racing is a really interesting way, and we've only begun to see the very beginning of that in the world of drones. So I think what's truly interesting is that we're going to see racing as being a continuing, ongoing subject in which the technologies will be developed that can then spin off and improve other areas. That's what I see that is going to be the consequence of what you've done.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that, but my view of it is that it kind of flips education around, Ted, in the sense that instead of students doing something or reading something or engaging in something because a teacher tells them to do it, they're really self-motivated to solve a problem. So they're driven by their own desires rather than being forced to do something, and that's a very, very important part as far as the learning cycle is concerned, when people are doing something through their own initiative rather than being forced to do it because they're being told to. And the discovery process that occurs in that kind of an environment is something that will feed people throughout the rest of their lives, and that also then contributes to the further improvements and iterations of whatever the technology may be, whether it's biology, whether it's electronics, whatever it is. That same mindset, that same desire to innovate and change and improve becomes internalized, and once that occurs, that really is a lifetime event.
So that's moving into the domain of critical thinking. Let's get back and develop some more thoughts on that after we take our first break here. See you in about a minute.
Hello, everybody. I'm IC Davidson. Thanks for tuning in to ThinkTech Hawaii. One of the things that we do here, or the thing that we do here, is promote civic engagement in Hawaii. What does that mean? We want to talk about things that people want to hear about, and we want you to engage us and be part of that conversation. One of the ways that you can do that is by joining in during our live show via Twitter. How do you do that? Well, you get on the interwebs and get Twitter, get an account, and mention us if you have a question. What you'll do is you tune into our show live, tweet us questions, and our hosts and guests will address them accordingly. It's really easy, it's really fun, and I think that your participation in what we're doing here will help us continue the dialogue on very important issues that we're trying to cover. Sustainability, clean energy, you name it, we're on top of it. We want you to be part of what we're doing, because together we'll be able to make things change. Thank you for watching ThinkTech Hawaii, thinktechhawaii.com, weekdays 12 to 5 p.m. That was weird.
Okay. Friday afternoon, folks, downtown Honolulu, the final segment of our show for today, Where the Road Leads. The road in this particular show leads more and more to UASs, or unmanned air systems, or you might say it's led more and more by unmanned air systems. I want to thank our guest, who's 2,500 miles away in Sacremento, Bruce Parks of many different associations. Bruce, talk a little bit about how you got into the UAS or the drone business, and what you're doing with AUVSI.
Well, I got into it about three years ago, Ted, when we built our own aircraft. We're here in Sacramento. We looked at the industry, could see that it was going to grow. We built a fixed wing aircraft. I've got a partner who's an absolutely outstanding pilot. So we built our plane, we built our ground station, and we built something here in Sacramento specifically for agriculture, because as you may know, I think there's something on the order of 4,000 different types of crops within a 100-mile radius of where I sit. You know, I mean, heck, just north of us, there's 500,000 acres of just rice. So we designed the aircraft to do that. We, tried to find sensors that would work on it. But the bottom line is we quickly found out that because of FAA regulations, although we could do that, we couldn't charge for it. So there was no real profit motive or incentive or a way to pay for our time. And it was at that point that it became involved with the AUVSI, Association of Unmanned Vehicles, joined the Silicon Valley chapter, and last December became an officer and board member of that entity. I helped to create the very first drone expo in San Francisco in 2013. So I've worked pretty diligently since then with our California State Legislature on a lot of legislative issues facing us. So I've been deeply involved in the industry for quite a bit of time. Still haven't found a way to become profitable, but I'm not the Lone Ranger in that regard.
Absolutely. That's totally a cool background to bring into our situation here on Oahu. And you're working with the team that's developing the drone racing activity, the international competition that's going to take place next year here, and as you mentioned before, Kualoa Ranch. So what you've done is you've solved the problem of regulations by working that competition under AMA rules. So it doesn't have the limitations that we'd have if we were doing it in a commercial sense. It's being done as a hobbyist event. Is that how you want to characterize that?
Yeah, that's essentially correct, Ed.
And so the hobbyist environment allows all this to come in, and it allows things to move fast. It allows us to reach out to the schools, and you can actually put something together under that cover that you really couldn't quite in the commercial world until the regulations are in place to allow this sort of thing to happen commercially.
That's correct. And the other important thing for me with respect to the racing is that it gives drones a different perception. People, once they see what goes on with these racers, it's just simply thrilling. I mean, when I was over there with you at the end of September, and we were out there at Kualoa Ranch, and these guys, these pilots, I mean, they're some of the best in the world, and to see them racing up the fingers of those lava mountains, spinning those things around with what they call a forward position view camera. You're wearing a set of goggles, and it's like you're sitting right in the front seat of that aircraft, and then turn that aircraft around and come screaming down the ravines at 100+ miles per hour. I have to tell you, that's exciting, and anybody that sees it is going to be excited by it. And that's the kind of experience that we hope to bring to the world next October, because we will be able, we hope, to live stream this event so that people theoretically can snap on a pair of goggles and fly with a pilot. And that's going to be a very exciting thing. It opens the doors to a different view of what drones are and what they are capable of, most particularly in the area of search and rescue, where we begin to use as aircraft to solve a multitude of problems, from dropping a life-saving vest into the water or facilitating search and rescue. That's going to spin off from this, and we want people to see it and understand it.
You mentioned the perception change, and I certainly went through an epiphany myself, meeting you 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago, whenever it was. We went to Lanai, did some work there, and back on Oahu. And just as this particular bird we have on the table here, which is a military task force derived system, has a performance capability and reliability margin over and above the sort of the consumer level drones that are out there, so do the racers have an equal or more performance margin increase over something like this out of the military. And so until people actually experience firsthand what you're speaking of, it's almost impossible to understand. But the rate of climb, the ability to handle the high winds, the ability to have extremely precise maneuvering at very high speeds in very confined environments, with decision making that is keeping pace with or maybe leading the drone itself, and by the way, being very durable. So if they have an accident or hit something, they simply have structural fuses that bend and it change the prop and go again. So a whole different world of high capability done for the purpose of racing is emerging in this domain that we'll see next year here in September in Kualoa Ranch. And I think what's interesting is that that's going to change the entire search and rescue domain of where the UAS has come into the search and rescue domain, because you can get so much faster to a place where it's needed. And as George Purdy on Lanai points out, we might be able to change search and recovery into search and rescue just because the information can be extracted that much faster by high-speed systems that can get in very close and aren't concerned about the wind or the turbulence in the mountains or whatever it might be. There's so much performance margin here in those racers that it just changes your whole perspective of the utility of something like this. It's no longer your father's airplane. It's now it's like a jet fighter in that regard. And so I've just completely impressed by what's happened there. And what's also interesting to me is that the industry is really stepping up to this. The precision manufacturing, the reliability of systems, the high rates of communication, the goggles that we had in here last week and had yesterday up there in Fairfield, California. Goggles to bring the world to your brain a little closer than having to have all the confusion of the other things coming in that are distracting you. So we're going to see through that racing business a continued evolution and a rapid evolution in the interpretations people make from the information they get, in the abilities to move forward with higher speeds and probably higher payloads. In fact, how about a payload carrying component to the competition? Wouldn't that be cool? Have a payload function in there. How about adding a real search and rescue to it out in the ocean, as we've talked about out in Kualoa perhaps, with the teams having to go take care of a situation they had no prior knowledge of. So it's an unstructured, unplanned, it's suddenly there, call the teams together, go find the target out there, and you got 30 minutes. There's the technology and the performance allow that, and the motivations and the capabilities and the desires and the skills of the people that you're bringing together that create the ability to go actually do something like that. So this racing thing, again, I keep saying it here, we don't have any examples of the racers on the table here, but that whole concept of racing is really going to change everything, and it's going to move fast.
Well, it is moving fast, and I think that's as you pointed out earlier, Ted. What the racing piece of the drone equation does is that it does really serve in the same position as NASCAR did the auto industry. It really does allow for rapid improvement on aircraft that will be flown by the average person. And that helps not just the individual, it helps the industry to improve their product line, to improve their performance levels, and to really, truly be able to improve the industry as a whole.
You know, and there's two sides to that. The other side of that is that I was just thinking, as you mentioned NASCAR and we talked about Indy 500 before, you don't touch a car like that in those domains unless you get your PhD in engineering. And the same thing is going to be true here. The the desire to do well in this domain is going to generate an interest in STEM, or STEAM, as you have created, adding the A to it for the arts. But science, technology, the arts, engineering, and math are the pieces that make all this happen. And the kids are going to get a chance to see that. And this then will excite them to continue further in their education in those areas. And because they're going to have to do that in order to contribute the next layer of capability, not just in the technology here, but also in the decision-making process, the intelligence that we deal with in our brains as we make conclusions and such. That's all going to be higher levels of performance and achievement are going to be needed in those areas in order to push the racing forward, and we'll see that happening.
Oh, beyond a doubt, you'll see that happening. And you know, once people really see it, I can remember when we were out there on one of the beaches, and the guys were out there flying. It was a public beach, and the guys were flying their aircraft, and there was an older couple that was standing there watching these aircraft fly in and among the trees, and I had a pair of goggles with me, and I asked her if she'd like to look at it, explained to her what she was going to see, and you know, Ted, it was just it was almost miraculous. She put them on a bit timidly, but when she was able to sit in that pilot's seat virtually, and see Chad Nowak dart and dive over and under obstacles and around trees at 75 or 80 miles an hour, this lady's jaw just dropped. But she truly stepped into a different paradigm, Ted. And that's what we're really looking at here. We are witnessing and at the edge of a paradigm shift in the way we use these tools that will completely and radically change the way the world works.
And on that account, going back to the Kualoa event construction of next year, how will the public have a chance to interact with the racers, or interact and have that same experience you just reported that ambient woman had by being there at the beach at the time?
Well, we don't know that for sure. One way for certain is we will have, great big jumbotron screens that will allow people to do that. But I'm certain that we will have many sets of goggles there for people to really be able to have that experience. And I don't know that we will be able to do it. We live stream this stuff, so theoretically you could sit in your home and put these goggles on and have the experience of flying with a pilot up and down these mountains, around courses, under stuff. That's what we're really hoping to do. We're really pushing the envelope on technology delivery, to tell you the truth.
And so public involvement, the public will be invited to this event. There'll be some...
Oh, absolutely. It's open to the public.
And there'll be workshops or some other kind of physical or social interactions that can be created where the racers and the designers and the public can mix in some way?
Absolutely. And we will have, going back to the young people, we will have a design, build, fly component to it, and we'll get as many people engaged and involved in that as we can. And the interesting thing about that is these young people will have the opportunity to learn these skill sets from some of the very best people in the world. And that's just going to be exciting for some of these people.
Bruce, the ideas you guys have brought forward are they're so compelling, and they're so novel, and they're so breaking the barriers of the past. This is really an exciting thing that you're doing, and I think that it's going to be difficult for people to understand. It'll take a long time to promote and advertise, and we'll do that a lot here on this show. Every time we have a change, when there's a new set of information associated with that 2016 October event at Kualoa, let's bring it on the show and talk about it so that we can get the word out to folks, including the development of the workshops, including the development of the kids camps and the kids programs and such. But we're reaching the end of our time here, so we'll be closing the show here for the weekend. But I wanted to thank you, Bruce, so much for the time we spent together this week, and then for having the additional time to come on the show here at the end of the week after core hours are over in California, where you live. If you could say a word or two that you wanted people to take away from this show, what might it be?
Well, I think that the thing that I would like people to do is just become increasingly aware of the adaptability of this technology. You'll see it change. You'll see it, see it in a whole range of arenas. Most particularly, I think, and most immediately, you're going to see it in the search and rescue arena, particularly there in Hawaii, where I think you've got a tremendous opportunity to build out and beta test a thoroughly integrated search and rescue operation on the islands. And I think that that would be an absolutely wonderful thing to participate in and to help to develop. It helps the entire island chain.
And that would be a direct outcome of the racing activity.
That's
the
right.
technology from racing would go forward, the thinking process, and the collection of all this energy into one spot. So Bruce Parks at AVUSI and many other entrepreneurial vectors in Sacramento, thank you very much for bringing on the show. And again, thanks for the time we spent together this week.
Oh, thank you, Ted. It was an absolute pleasure.
We'll see you again at the next conference, and we'll certainly see you here at the table as we head towards October of 2016. And once again, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Ted.
And folks, that's it, and we'll see you next Friday.